Welcome to the podcast. It's dedicated to making you a faster cyclist. The Ask a Cycling Coach podcast presented by TrainerRoad. Today, we have Hannah Otto with us and Ivy Audrain, and we're going to talk about Hannah's Leadville learnings. We're also going to talk about saddle problems. We're going to talk about rotational weight and if it makes a difference. Lots of good stuff. But first things first, Hannah, we got this from James, and he says, I saw Hannah coming through the Twin Lakes alternate station and this is at Leadville, and gave her a cheer. My day at Leadville was a memorable one with friends, but I've got to ask, how do y'all not walk power line? Where I was, every single person was walking, but I still tried. That only lasted for about 30 seconds until I literally fell over. Can you ask Hannah next time she's on? As a note, he says that I had 32.52 for my gearing. Hannah, we can go into that, and then let's go into the learnings that you had from Leadville and everything since then.
Yeah. Thanks so much, James, for the cheers. There were a lot of people cheering out there, and it was super greatly appreciated. It made me smile so much. So thank you. It was noticed. And kudos to you for trying to ride Powerline. Like, I feel like that is definitely one of the big things, is because it is such a intimidating piece of the course. A lot of people ride up and are just like, okay, and here's where I walk. So kudos to you for trying. It's the first step. Honestly, the fact that a lot of people were walking is probably a reason that you also had to walk. Traffic is a major contributor there because there isn't a lot of room for error. Also, looking up towards the top of the climb is a big thing. You want to have your eyes focused upward, not looking down at your wheel, because you will start to go really slow, start to get a little shaky. And if you're looking down, you go where your eyes are. So the fact that you fell over, very likely that could have been a factor. Balance and confidence. There's several times going up Powerline or going up Columbine, maybe you hit a little sketchy section where you start to slide. And if I was really nervous about it, my reaction would probably be foot down, and then you're stuck. Mm-hmm. But since I've ridden them in the past, since I'm confident in my ability to ride them, that's not really on my radar. Instead of thinking foot down, I'm thinking, like using my core strength, and I'm getting really solid on the bike to maintain that pedaling. You also do have to be okay with different cadences. I'm definitely not doing 80, 90 RPMs at Powerline. It's more like 60 RPMs, which for a lot of people is something they don't train and are not comfortable with. And then finally, there is a power minimum. So if you're doing all of those things and you still can't make it up, you might just have to get a little stronger, and maybe that'll be next year.
Yeah, well said. That climb is really, really, really hard.
Yeah.
Hannah, how did Leadville as a whole for you? We talked about you coming into it. How did it end up going based on your expectations? Because your expectations were not to go out there and defend. You knew that you could, but your expectations were to go out there and execute a strong race. And how did it go? I didn't see much in terms of coverage or anything else. I'm eager to hear.
Yeah, it was a super exciting race. And like you said, obviously I want to defend. It's always a goal to defend, but I was coming in very much in the fact that I think Leadville can be executed pretty individually. And based on my win in 2022, I know what it takes to do that. And so I was going in with a very set plan I wanted to execute. And I did. I beat my time from 2022 by 5 minutes. So I'm stoked on what I executed. And I think really what it came down to is other people had a different strategy, and it paid off for them on that day. And that's why we race. But really what I wanted to know that my physical ability was good enough to win. And then a lot of people are strong out there. And so a lot of the time in racing, it does come down to executing a plan, everything from your equipment choices to where you put out your efforts. And so I took a more conservative pacing approach. The race, as we learned, started out really, really fast for Keegan to break the record. And I decided to stick with my pacing plan. It was a decision I needed to make in the span of about 30 seconds. And I felt good about that plan to stick with my pacing. And I stuck with my pacing from start to finish. I was right on the marks that I set for myself. But in hindsight, I think if I had burned a few matches at the start to jump on that train and gain that free speed, it could have played out very differently. So because it started so fast, people really went fast off the front, and I was about 17th entering St. Kevin's. I was 13th getting to the bottom of Columbine. I was 5th at the top of Columbine. I was 4th at the bottom of St. Kevin's coming back, and I ended up 4th, but in a sprint finish for 3rd. So Oof. I was very, very much moving through the field the whole race, and it's really interesting to look back on power files because, for example, Sophia and I, our normalized power for the race was within 3 watts of each other, which, considering the fact that we have different power meters, is pretty much negligible. We essentially had the same power, but looking at the files, we put out that power in very, very different places. Mm-hmm. And that just goes to show how that strategy makes a difference in the final outcome.
Go ahead, Ivy.
Oh, I mean, yeah, it just isn't always the right strategy to go with that early move though, Hannah. I mean, you had to watch, 5, 10, 15 riders leave you essentially in that first, 20 minutes and just trust and know that you're going to like chip away and come back at them. And it's so hard as a rider to be like, what if I'm on the other end of that and I gamble and I do this big effort to go with this move and then I'm the one that gets picked off later, Like when do you decide to do that?
Well, I think in my brain, I was really confident in my ability to pace, and I know that I could have a strong second half. So my last 15 miles of the race on Strava were actually the fastest time on record for those final 15 miles. So I was moving at the end of the race. But obviously, I didn't go fast enough at the start. I lost almost all of my time from the start to the bottom of Columbine. And that's where that gamble comes in, right? Is because I was confident in my ability to execute, and I wasn't willing to gamble on other people's ability to execute. And by that, I mean, I could put in all of that effort to get in that group, to get to pipeline, and then look around and no one wants to work. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that was a gamble that I didn't take on the day, and it did not pay off, and that's fine. And now next time I know, maybe you have to make that gamble. Maybe that's where we're at. Maybe that's a different thing I do for next year. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I bet on myself, and I think I proved to myself that I could do what I knew I could do, but I needed to bet on circumstances a little bit more.
So Hannah, when you made that decision, looking back, do you think that if you had gone early, we're all guessing here. It's all like a hypothetical, but do you think that had you went early, that you would have been able to finish in 3rd or 4th? Do you think that it would, sprinting for that same position, would you have ended up in the same spot? Or do you think that the odds have you finishing higher or even further back, right? Because it was such a hard effort in the beginning. Where do you think you would have ended up? Again, hypothetical.
Yeah. I mean, it's really hard to know, right? Because we all have those woulda, coulda, shouldas. Everyone from first to last has, if I had done this, I would have finished there. But everything has a consequence in itself. If you do this, someone does this. And so there's no way of knowing. I mean, I think that if I had gone at the start, I would have finished higher up now in hindsight, because there is an element of free speed. So I don't want to diminish that effort at the beginning, because in order to get in that group, you need to put out a big effort. But once you're in that group, you're putting out similar power numbers, and you can see that in a lot of the files. And so I sort of realized my mistake coming across pipeline, and in the middle of the race, that's not something you worry about. It was, I actually think that's a good thing to talk about. So I'll kind of go through it, but going up St. Kevin's, that's the first climb. I'm really focused on my own effort, my own pacing. I'm watching my power. I'm watching my time. I feel really good about it. And as we descended down and hit pipeline, I kind of looked around at my group, and I did have a good group. I had a good group of women. And I learned later on that a lot of those ladies at the front, Sophia, Alexis, they had a big group of men. And so if they're sitting in the back of that group and the men are maintaining a higher average speed than us, we might actually be putting out the same amount of power to stay in a group or a similar amount relatively, tucking in, but they're moving at a faster pace. And so I'm bleeding time. And going across pipeline, that would not be the place for me to say, well, shoot, we're not moving fast enough. Let me go to the front and make up for this, because that is where, okay, now this effort isn't going to pay off.
Cue
and
that
so
Dumb
once
Ways to Die song. Right?
Exactly. And so once I realized my mistake in that, the mindset sort of shifted as pipeline going out towards Columbine was probably the only time in the race where I didn't look at my pacing or my power, because at that point I was at the mercy of the group. It just was what it was. And so during that time, the only thing I was thinking about was nutrition and hydration. I was essentially stuffing my face, recognizing the fact that this race is a second half effort for me. And it was going to come down to how much time I had to make up that time. And that's another element too, right? Is I don't know whether I'm 4 minutes back, 5 minutes back, 10 minutes back. I have no idea. And I didn't know that until relatively I got to the top of Columbine and could look at them coming down. And that was the first time I had the opportunity to sort of lay out in my mind what I had to tackle for the rest of the race.
Yeah, man. And if people are listening to this and they're like, why are you still talking about Leadville? It's one of the most popular races for our listeners. So,
bro, somebody said, why are they talking about a local gravel race and not whatever Pro Tour road race was happening at the time? And I was like, a local gravel race?
Yeah, it's one of the most popular ones for our listeners that people try to qualify for. And it's a big thing. And in terms of, I guess, Ivy, in terms of why we don't talk about, there are other people that talk about the tour and they do great stuff. In fact, we've covered the tour more than we ever have this year with our social media content. So if you want that, go over to Instagram, go to YouTube, go to TikTok, and you can follow us and check out all that stuff.
Right. And if Hannah had raced the tour, we would be talking to her about the tour, but
Hannah's doing.
She raced Leadville, and to get the insight of a rider that's at the top level, like that's special. So
Pretty
we'll let
cool.
other people talk about road race.
Yeah,
Sorry.
exactly. Yeah. We love all forms of racing. Okay, Hannah, post Leadville, what's your next race that you have coming up? And what was your plan post Leadville for training?
Yeah, so my next race is Schwamigan, which is the next race in the Grand Prix. It's about a 2.5 hour mountain bike race in Wisconsin. And it's about 4-ish weeks away. And so so after Leadville, I made the plan a long time ago at the start of the season that the week after Leadville would be sort of a decompression week. And that doesn't mean week totally off the bike, but it means it was my time to mentally relax. And I think that's good for people to hear, because it also pulls attention to the fact that there is a huge mental load that goes into competing at any level, but especially at the highest level. And so for me, when I'm prepping for the season, prepping for big races, prepping for races like Leadville, I'm putting everything into it. Everyone at this level is. And everything means everything to a professional racer. It means sleep, nutrition, and a lot of saying no to social events, no to family members, just no. And sometimes it can feel even like you miss out on a lot of things because you're putting everything into this one mission. And so for me, mentally, more so even than the physical recovery, I need the mental recovery to be able to say, yes, I want to go out to dinner. Yes, I want to go on this hike. Yes, I want to hang out with you. And so since I can't do that all the time, I'm very intentional about planning when I get to do those things. And so I planned what I've dubbed a yes week after Leadville, where we went to one of my favorite places up in Priest Lake, Idaho with some friends. I visited family. We did all kinds of fun things. And I rode my bike too, but it just wasn't that all-encompassing effort where I got to really mentally unwind. And now I'm back in Salt Lake and we start the whole process over again. Big training block time.
Oh.
Nice. That's cool. Hannah, how do you manage? I'm sure that you feel pressure every day that you should be training and advancing because you're a professional athlete. So what do you tell yourself during those downtimes to make yourself not just sit there and build up anxiety while you're not on the bike? Because I've seen some people say, yeah, I'm going to take a rest week. And every day they're like, I'm not riding, I'm getting slower. And it actually ends up like putting them in a worse place a lot of the time, even though they didn't train physically. They're just emotionally and mentally wrecked because they feel like every day they're losing, they're kind of like sinking in quicksand, you know? Mm-hmm. How do you reckon with that?
It's really hard. I feel like to sit here and say what I do is in some ways hiding behind a little bit of a curtain, because do as I say, not as I do sort of thing, because it is really hard. And that probably has been the biggest thing that I've learned this year, actually, is after racing so much and so much travel. I actually had a moment earlier this year where it just, things were feeling really hard. And I sat down with my coach and I'm going through this and that. And we need to do this. We need to do that. We need to do this. And he's like, no, you need to take 4 days off. And it was like borderline devastating to me. It was really, really hard, but I very begrudgingly listened. And it was the best thing I could have done for my entire season. And I'm super thankful for that, because now I have that experience to look back on and remember, okay, that was really hard, but it did work. And I feel like I'm leaning more and more into that and learning, reading books about, I just read Peak Performance. And a lot of what they talk about in that book is taking the time to rest in order to be able to perform at your peak. And so even though it's really hard in those moments, I try and lean back on the objective experience of this does work. And honestly, I also know, even though in those moments I'm like wrestling with it and feeling really off kilter, people who aren't taking that are not advancing. And I've been in those shoes before as well. And so I know that that's the truth.
Yeah. Yeah, it's tough to balance, Abby?
Yeah, and Hannah's advice is so applicable to athletes that are also not professional athletes, because I feel like a lot of people with really busy lives and jobs and families and a lot of responsibilities, they experience the same anxiety just when they miss a workout, because that time is so precious. And I experience this too sometimes when I so frequently have an hour window to do a workout and it's bonkers and I skip cool down, and that time is so precious. And when something goes sideways and I can't do it, the anxiety that results of, I'm not doing what I should. I miss an opportunity to get faster. Like I'm blowing it, just like one workout. And so what Hannah's saying is applicable not just to rest, but to when things go kind of sideways and you miss a day, like you need to relax and calm down and know that in the grand scheme of things, it's probably beneficial, especially if you're pushing it and spreading yourself thin, and it's okay to just take a step back,
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's funny too, because like give yourself the grace that you give other people, because when I see other athletes training hard, that doesn't make me nervous, because I know I train just as hard as anyone out there. But when I see other athletes resting, that's when I get nervous, because I'm like, oh my gosh, they're going to be so fresh and so strong. But then when I rest, it's like, oh my gosh, I'm getting slower. And somehow it just doesn't work in those opposites. So that's another thing that it is silly. Like, we're laughing, I'm making fun of it, but that's another thing I try and remember is when other people take time off, you always think, oh, wow, they're getting fresh and they're going to have such a good training block after this. So that applies to you as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. I want to read Rob's question because it directly applies to this. Rob says, thanks for the great training platform support. And of course, the always popular Ask a Cycling Coach podcast, where it seems like almost all the cycling and training questions I may have will be answered. 5 stars and thank you. Thanks, Rob. Appreciate it. Rob said 5 stars. Everybody listen to this. If you went and rated the podcast on Spotify today, that would be hugely helpful for the podcast. It'll make more people find it. So please go do that. That would be great. So here it is. I used TrainerRoad to train for Leadville this year. Being a Minnesotan and first timer, all I wanted to do was finish sub 12. Despite some training setbacks early in the year, I was able to pull off a finish of 11 hours and 10 minutes, several minutes behind my 2 other buddies who also got started on TrainerRoad. It's awesome, Rob. Well done. Now the race is over. I don't have anything on my calendar, and I don't know what to do with my life. And says in quotes or in parentheses, training life. Rob says, it feels like all the work is done now. I still want to get faster and fitter, but the toll of training for Leadville put a strain on my family and life in general. The easy answer, just go to a low volume plan. But if I recall correctly, it seemed like every workout was a borderline hard workout, and I feel like I will miss recovery workouts where I can just jump on the trainer and chill. I also want to work weight training back into my routine because some of my neglected muscles atrophied and my functional everyday strength just isn't what it used to be, and I'm worried weight training is going to compromise my ability to nail those low volume workouts. At any rate, hopefully this all makes sense. I'm wondering what different things I could do to keep building fitness, work in functional weight training, and not be overly worried that if I do a lift or outdoor ride with my homies a little too hard, that I won't be able to crush my plans prescribed rides. And then also Rob reminding you about balancing with family too, because he mentioned that it was hard with family. So it seems like what Rob is saying is like, I have 17 pounds of stuff and I need to fit it into a 10-pound bag, right? How do I do it so that no weight is left behind and everything is neatly organized so it doesn't affect each other adversely? And I sympathize with that, Rob. That's like my constant struggle. Like right now, I have not been training really since single track 6. I've done a handful of workouts, and it's just because, I need to allocate time elsewhere in life with family and with everything else, and the training has taken a bit of a backseat. So it ebbs and flows, and that's the first thing I just wanted to say with Rob is that, first of all, Rob, it's okay for you to go through a period of time where you don't train. And it's okay to go through a period of time where you feel like even demotivated to train or extremely you have to let those things be. Instead of thinking that you need to be all the time the same exact person with the same exact motivations and the same circumstances, because it's simply not it's not the case. Like flexibility should be something that is promoted way more than these like strict. I wake up at 4 a.m. and I have my morning routine and I do this. And while that's great, flexibility is where actually things happen, I think, instead of just those purely rigid schedules. And I think it should be honored. So Rob, in this case, first of all, before we get into any further recommendations, don't feel bad about what you're going through right now. That's normal. What would you say to Rob, Hannah, and then Ivy? We'll go into your advice too.
Well, I think there's 2 sides to this question. The first is I really pulled into the sentence that the training put a lot of stress on his family life, because that is super real. And I think that is where the time off comes afterwards, because you need to let not only yourself, but everybody in your life hit equilibrium again. When you train for a really big event like this, sometimes it becomes a very selfish endeavor. People put a lot into you. And I think there is a period for yourself and for others that you need to open yourself up to give that back. And so I think the first thing is take some time to do that, whatever that looks like. Even if you get less fit, in fact, you probably should lose some fitness because that's how our training cycles go. That's okay. And whatever amount of time that is that you need is the right amount of time. But eventually, I think personally that things will hit equilibrium again. Everyone will feel again like okay, the debt has been repaid. We're all on equal footing. We've found our rhythm again. And that's then when you can start asking these questions again. So that then enters the second part of your question is, how do I do all these things that I want to do while getting faster? And I think the bottom line is that your body needs some sort of novel stimulus in order to improve. So if you are going from a higher volume plan to a lower volume plan and you're still desiring to get faster, you're going to have to put in harder workouts. That's just the way it is. That said, the great thing about cycling is that there are so many ways to get faster without actually getting fitter. And so this could be a time period in your life in which you focus on those things. And you're already talking about some of the ways that can happen. So strength training, that might not directly help your cardiovascular fitness, but it's going to make you better rounded. It's going to help you with those imbalances that ultimately might make you a faster cyclist. Those group rides, they might not be a structured training plan. And so they're not going to ultimately fit into that peak model that will help you achieve something on race day, but they're going to help you with skills. They're going to help you with tactics. They're going to help you with comfortability on the bike. And so ultimately, you will perform faster. And now is a great time, it sounds like, in the season in which you can focus on those things so that you've checked those boxes so that you've got faster in those areas when you are ready to once again take on this structured training to get not just faster, but fitter as well.
Mm-hmm. I feel like Rob knows this and is asking us for permission to do so. Sure. Or asking for our stamp of approval. Because it seems like, Rob knows that going down to low volume will be maybe have some more intense workouts. And, if you still want to have that jump on the trainer chill time, that's a great circumstance under which you should be doing low volume because you're still getting all your key workouts. And then in that, this extra space that Hannah's talking about that you've created to fill in those other gaps in your life, if you do feel like you have a moment to get on the trainer and do a chill spin, then you can. And there's no pressure because you've already done your key workouts that are important with low volume. So that's why I like low volume. And then the only other thing, because Hannah nailed it, the only other thing I want to talk about is Rob being concerned about weight training impacting those workouts. You shouldn't be trying to set deadlift PRs every time you lift when you're incorporating it into training and with the goal in mind of being faster on the bike. You don't need to do these big Olympic lifts. And in fact, if you're trying to incorporate it into your training structure now and you haven't really done so before, you shouldn't be doing lifts like that to start out anyways. You should be doing functional strength stuff that sometimes doesn't involve much weight at all, and certainly not specific gym big weight equipment. You can just do stuff with a kettlebell or body weight stuff. You don't need to go set these, squat or hang clean PRs because you decided you're going to be in the gym to be a faster cyclist. You don't need to do that right away.
Yeah, the episode that will, by the time this publishes, I'm trying to think of weird decoupled timelines, non-linear. The strength training episode that we will have published will come out the week prior, and Derek Teal talked all about all the different things you could do without going to the gym and getting that big stuff. You can make yourself plenty sore with body weight exercises. Trust a person who does that all the time and blows himself up from that. The thing that's standing out to me, Rob, is this concern that the workouts might be too intense with the low volume plan. And Hannah, you did a great job of pointing out the fact that look, if you want to get fast with less, then you do have to turn something up. And if you're doing less, you have to turn up something, which is intensity. That said, it's not like it's all VO2 or something. It's just instead of having those easier rides and everything a bit more balanced out, instead you're going to be spending time sweet spot and above because you're training 3 days a week, and that 3 days a week is going to be, it's intentionally designed, or low volume plans, for people that also are time constrained. So it's not like it's 2 hours every day. It's 60 to 90 minutes typically. So with all that said, there are a couple things that you can keep in mind. Number one, adaptive training is going to adjust all those workouts so that they're appropriately difficult. So it doesn't mean that low volume, suddenly you're going to have the hardest VO2 workouts you've ever done. No, it's going to be appropriately difficult VO2 workouts, just as it would be if you were doing any other plan. So that's adjusted for you. So don't worry about that. That's one of the best parts about adaptive training. But the other part too is that you can always just use workout alternates. So whatever workout you see on there, if you want to adjust it and you want to do a slightly easier one, or you want to do a shorter one, or whatever it might be, longer or harder, you can do that too. So it's really easy to do. So you have a lot of flexibility. But Rob, one thing to mention, you mentioned the strain that was put on your family. I can't help but think that this might be the time too, as Ivy and Hannah have said, like to embrace those group rides, to embrace the strength training, and then to use Train Now so you can get just like a recommended workout when you want to drop in and do one. Because maybe it's that strict adherence to a schedule that puts strain on your family, maybe not. But I know for me it is. If I'm like, okay, every Tuesday and every Thursday, this is what I have going on, then my family bends around that. And at least in our family, what we have to do is we just have to communicate that, because my wife has things, my son and everybody, we all have things that when we all form our lives around that, so then everybody can be supported. But if you're looking to alleviate that and give your family a bit of time back so that, you can bend to their situations and circumstances, I'd recommend doing Train Now, because that gives you a bit of flexibility. And don't worry, like Hannah said, you lose a bit of fitness, that's fine. You'll get it back. So it's totally okay. Before we get into further questions, I want to read a couple things. First of all, shout outs. So Ivy and I went and raced the Mammoth Pedal Palooza. Super fun time. Thanks for coming to that, Ivy. That was cool.
Yeah, super fun. Great event. Everyone should go do that race next year. Like if you have a 90s hardtail mountain bike with rim brakes, it's okay. Like you can still have a really fun time on this course. This course is amazing. I love it up there.
It's a blast. It's like some of the Nationals mountain bike, the National Champs mountain bike course that they had, but none of the technical stuff. There's like still a bit of that tucked in spots, but man, it's just a blast. Anyways, I was telling Ivy that I was going, and she's like, maybe I'll go. And sure enough, she came, and it was a blast. So, but we saw some people there. Dan, first of all, hopefully everything went well in the Mammoth Gran Fondo. We saw him in the grocery store, and he recognized our voices, and he was like, oh my gosh, it's Jonathan and Ivy, which is awesome.
That's awesome.
Also, Malia, who did amazing, and she ended up on the podium for the pro women, and she's a junior racer and big time TrainerRoad user and podcast listener, and Darren as well. Darren shepherded, I think, Ivy around on a lap even when Ivy was like seeing cross-eyed at 10,000 feet.
Excuse me, I was shepherding him on the downhill.
There you go. Yeah. When Darren was cross-eyed. Yeah. Yeah. It's good stuff. It's good fun. So I want to give them shout outs. And then in addition to that, I just want to read from Mike. Mike says, hey, TrainerRoad team, just a quick input and plug for low volume training this year, albeit with some extra stuff thrown in. I've been using TrainerRoad since January this year and built up to my goal of the British National 12-hour championship, and I achieved my goal and more of a 10th place finish with a finishing distance of 275.5 miles. Way to go, Mike. Long distance stuff with low volume, just because that's what life allows. Way to go. And then Mark says, not a question, more of just TrainerRoad loving. Completed a year at high volume after a year of club riding, but not hard or not structured at all. My main motivation was to be a faster cyclist, but also have more time with my family and my career. My A event is the Swiss Epic. I'm here now. Stage 1 was so good. Very hard, 30 miles with 6,000 feet of climbing, but incredible trails. I got 16th out of 80 today in Masters, and I'm 1 year from Grand Masters. Super pleased, so thanks, TR team. And that's my bucket list event. Way to go, Mark. It's over by now. I hope it went really well. Just amazing. But yeah, that's my peak event. I cannot wait. Someday I'm going to do the Swiss Epic, and that's like going to be the coolest race, I think.
Is it partners for everybody or just the pros?
I think for everybody, because my friend Levi went and raced it, and he did it with a friend, and it was I'm nearly certain it was required. So it's the same folks that do Cape Epic, and they do the Swiss Epic there. So it looks amazing, though. I'd probably crash from just like looking at views.
I think you ride like around the Matterhorn and stuff on that one.
Yeah,
it'd be amazing.
Wouldn't that be amazing? Yeah, Hannah, you want to do it?
Yeah.
Teammates, that'd be awesome.
Sounds great.
Have fun,
Swiss
guys.
Epic people.
Have a good time.
I don't know how we can afford to do that because Cape Epic was so expensive. So if you want to reach out to us, that'd be great. Anyways, Chris says, I have a second-hand bike that I got fitted for my 70.3 a couple years ago. including a new split saddle. Split saddle means a split nose saddle. So typically it's like, it's one piece toward the back where your sit bones are at. And then moving forward from there, the saddle just has two like forward rails that are padded. So it's like somebody just like chopped the center part of the saddle out and there's no nose where it reconnects. They're for triathlon, they're quite common. And for time trial bikes too, they're somewhat common. Then Chris says, however, most of my cycling training was done on a stationary bike with indoor cycling classes. When I did do any rides or events on my bike, I found the saddle uncomfortable on long rides, but just chalked it up to unfamiliarity. Fast forward to post-COVID, I've been using TrainerRoad's training programs that have 60 to 90-minute rides, and I was still feeling really uncomfortable and getting saddle sores despite doing everything I'm supposed to, like wearing clean shorts every time and using Body Glide. I knew which Body Glide actually might be causing more issues than it's helping in this case, but we'll get into that in a bit. I knew my form had changed significantly with the lack of strength and mobility work since COVID. So I got fitted again by a new bike fitter this time in hopes to get through a 60-minute ride without pain. This included buying yet another new saddle and an offset seat post. And when I did my follow-up once the new gear came in, I let her know that I was still feeling uncomfortable. She said I likely just have a sensitive undercarriage and that I'll just have to live with it. My first question is that true? Do some people just have to put up with a sensitive undercarriage? When I'm riding, despite trying to keep my sit bones anchored, it always feels like I'm balancing on the tips of my sit bones. I'm guessing my lordosis has something to do with it. Lordosis is talking about the lumbar spine curve that a lot of us have and it can get even like in some cases, it can be to the point where it's quite extreme, but basically where our lower back, our hips are pointed backwards or tilted backwards, or our pelvis is tilted forward. And then that introduces like a steep bend into our lower back. I'm going to put a picture on screen so you can see what I'm saying because I'm doing a terrible job of explaining it. Anyways, they say, I'm guessing my lordosis has something to do with it, but I'm unclear. I just don't have the money for yet another bike fitting. So I've tried moving my saddle forward to try to get off the tips of my sit bones, but then it obviously throws the rest out of alignment. I know you can't do virtual fitting for my particular body on a podcast, but any insight would be helpful. Thanks for all your insight and help from Chris. Ivy, what are your thoughts on this one?
I mean, the big red flag for me is the fixation on where Chris is sitting on the sit bones, where I feel like as a triathlete in a time trial bike, that's not the biggest point of contact with the saddle when you're in that super aggressive position. It's your pubic bones and the soft tissue around it much further front. And that's why I feel like don't spend your money on another bike fit. And bike fitters are incredible and can use some incredible tools, but ultimately, unless you're able to measure, and I don't even know if you could, or I'm sure there are some ways in which you could, but to understand what's going on at the actual point of contact with the saddle in terms of your sit bone to pubic bone widths, the soft tissue that's there that's actually contacting the saddle, no one can tell you what that feels like and what is optimal, because what is optimal might not feel good, and but you can have a bad saddle because what feels good might not be optimal. So in that sense, I think Chris should not spend any more money on a bike fitter, and maybe experiment with some different saddles that have different width noses in the front, and experiment a little bit with, it sounds like she had setback looked at, but look at changing the angle too. These are really finite things that don't seem like they're a big deal, but really just like a couple degrees tilt on a saddle for me can be the difference between me not being able to ride in it and feeling like it's the most comfortable thing and I can sit in it for 5 or 6 hours, no problem. Like, it's crazy how minimal these things are that make a big difference. And ultimately, I think the rider has to spend time on the bike, experimenting with that stuff, figuring it out. I feel like every time I get a new bike, even if I apply my previous fit and know that the fit is right in terms of reach and setback and everything, I will still designate my first couple of rides to be super chill and to plan on stopping frequently to kind of mess around with the saddle angle and tilt and position, and even be prepared to be close to home and go back home and throw a different saddle on and see how it feels. So I think that ultimately this is an experimentation that riders have to go through to find what works for them in a saddle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Hannah, Yeah, what do you think on this one?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with what Ivy said. I also want to jump off of that in agreement and saying that, Chris, you are not alone. Every woman that I have helped get into cycling has come back at some point and said, so does this sport just kind of hurt? It takes a while to figure out the saddle situation, but the answer is no, it should not hurt. And so I think Ivy really covered well the fact that you need to try out different saddles. So I wanted to focus a little bit on your question regarding how posture can impact that. So the first thing I thought of when I read this question was something called lower crossed syndrome, which is a postural syndrome that a lot of people have. It results from an imbalance of muscles. So basically, it's a shortening of the hamstrings and a lengthening of the abdominals and glute muscles. So weak glutes, weak abdominals, and then shortening of those hip flexors. And it's really common because that's the position that we're in when we're sitting. So when you're sitting, you'll see that your legs are up. That means those hip flexors are shortened. That means that your back, those glutes are lengthened, which means they're not activated. And usually this results in some level of low back pain and hamstring pain. And if you just Google lower cross syndrome, you'll be able to see in the image that most people who have this, their pelvis is tilted anteriorly, which would cause you on that saddle to roll forward on to those soft tissue bits. And also you even mentioned that you have lordosis. That's going to be something you see in these images as well, because as your pelvis tilts forward, that curve in your spine becomes really accentuated. So I think that it just based on what you said, it's very likely that this is something that you have. Again, a lot of people have it. And because of that, like you're saying, you're not anchoring on those sit bones, you're pulling forward onto your soft tissue, causing more pain. It also, because of those imbalances, you have a less stable pelvis. And so it can create a lot of rocking on the saddle, which then creates more friction in those areas and even more discomfort on your soft tissue and saddle sores. So you start getting that friction, that skin starts rubbing, and that can be where those saddle sores come from. So from a saddle standpoint, they make all different kinds of shapes and sizes of saddles. Usually for someone who has an anterior pelvic tilt, you're going to be looking for a flat saddle. So that could be something really objective as you start working through everything Ivy said. Check out some flat saddles. See if that helps you. See if you feel more anchored on the flat saddle, if you move around less. But a lot of this is going to come from off the bike work. I would stop spending your money, since you have already done it, I would stop spending your money on bike fits. And if you have the ability, spend your money on an analysis from a physical therapist or an athletic trainer, someone who's skilled in analyzing these body postures, and see what kind of molds you fit into in terms of, do you have lower cross syndrome? Do you have these imbalances that we're talking about? And then it's pretty basic off the bike work. I mean, obviously changing muscular imbalances takes time, but it's pretty basic exercises. You need to lengthen your hamstrings again. That's going to be a lot of stretching and mobility. I think I've seen Ivy even post some Instagram videos on some hip flexor things. I think I might have just said lengthen your hamstrings. I mean, lengthening your hip flexors. Some hip flexor lengthening. And then you're going to need to strengthen your glutes and abdominals. So you get to start going into those glute bridges. You know, you can be doing some dead bugs, like very basic. This is not super intense training. This is regaining that muscular balance.
Yeah, really well said, Hannah. And I want to go back to the body glide thing. So in most cases, you should never have to use like body glide. Body glide's typically going to be used for chafing, but not in between your chamois and you. Some people use chamois cream for that, but again, that's not to introduce some sort of like anti-friction layer to allow your chamois to move independently from you. That's just so that if there is some sort of movement, that it isn't hurting your skin. But I could very well see a situation where you're using body glide and that's actually causing like this anti-friction layer between you and your shorts. And as a result, it's causing you to move even more and feel even less stable on the bike. So that isn't where I would use body glide for sure. Just jumping on or adding something fresh to what we've said here. I would also recommend looking at your shorts. Like sometimes it's, even if the saddle is perfect, if you have the wrong bib shorts with a chamois that doesn't work, and there is no easy answer for this in terms of like, this is the right chamois. You just have to test them out and try. But sometimes that's, no matter how good your saddle is, it's just going to be uncomfortable because the chamois isn't right. In the triathlon world, you tend to have really thin chamois too, and they tend to be more minimal. And as a result, like a saddle that might be a bit more firm or might be a bit more structured in its shape is then you're going to notice that structure much more so than you would with like a typical cycling chamois that's a bit thicker. Sorry, Hannah, you were going to say.
No, I like that you then said if the chamois is too thin, because I was going to also say the opposite, which is if the chamois is too big or too wide for your body, that can cause a lot of problems because it'll bunch up on the sides inside your legs, and that can cause really bad chafing and friction as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have that issue with a lot of shorts where the chamois is too wide for me. And as a result, it ends up causing a lot of rawness, just like on the upper part of your legs, because it shouldn't be there. You know what I mean? The chamois should just be where your skin is making contact or your body's making contact with the saddle. And that's really the only spot that you need it. So, but yeah, that's what I would recommend there. I've had to jump around and try a lot of different chamois, and I found a lot of them don't work. I've also found that like bib shorts or kits that are really like stretchy fabric that aren't really tense, that also allows like the chamois to move around a bit more, and that can cause issues for me. So having stuff that's like a bit more compressive, which unfortunately tends to be like the higher end fabrics, it's a bit more expensive. I've found, at least for me personally. But that's where I start to get a bit more comfort out of it. The final thing, Ivy, you mentioned like, the feeling like bouncing on the tips of the sit bones. And Ivy mentioned you may not even need to worry about your sit bones a whole lot, just with how you sit on the bike and with the saddle and with who knows. Some time trialists are perfectly anchored with their sit bones, and triathletes, and that's where they sit. It all depends. But with that said, you can do a really easy job of like testing how wide your sit bones are. You can, like, if you went and got like a retool fit, they have you sit on this thing and it really quite literally maps with a pressure map on software. But you can also just like fill a bag with flour and like a Ziploc bag, get all the air out of it, and then sit on it. And when you sit on it so that you're like sitting on something and leaning forward like you would be on a bike. And you'll notice that there will be 2 prominent indentations in that flour. Measure that distance and then go over and measure your saddle, because there could be a chance that in this case, Chris might have like wider sit bones than the saddle that they're using. So as a result, they aren't like adequately supported. And as a result, that might be extra tippy. I don't think that would be the case, but that's a cost-effective way to go about doing this that doesn't involve you spending a lot of money for a fit.
Bike fitters don't know. I know this hack.
Sorry, their bike fitters are going to be in the comments hard right now. I know, I'm sorry, but we're not telling anybody how to adjust anything. We're just trying to provide somebody access to bike fitting sort of resources when they are clearly stating that they don't want to spend those resources on it anymore. So
yeah. And you're not alone,
it's a process.
This is tricky, and there's nothing wrong with you. I think this is something like almost every athlete goes through. I don't think I've heard of anyone that just takes a bike off the showroom floor and has the saddle that's on it and they're like, yeah, it's fine. I love it. I feel like this is something everybody goes through.
Yeah. But the whole thing of you having a sensitive undercarriage and you just have to live with it, I really struggle with that sentence. Yeah. I don't buy it. So keep trying, keep looking for things, because in my opinion, that is not not the answer to this at all.
Toughen up is not what we need.
No.
I mean, like you will get like your skin will get tougher over time. Like that does happen, but it's not. But it doesn't mean that some people are just like destined to struggle with this. So, and for those that just hop on and they just never had an issue with this, I have inner anger towards you, and frustration and envy. So, wish that was the case for me. So, Michael says, I follow to a degree. Thanks for the honesty, Michael. The low volume plan. I love that. The low volume plan, which is quite a common thing that we hear from people. They kind of view it as like a supplementary thing. And we've even advocated for that in the past. And man, I think we kind of learned our lesson because we were like, you can just do low volume and add stuff in. Then people were like, so I'm doing 26 hours a week and I added in low volume. And we're like, oh my gosh, please stop. And then they say TrainerRoad burnt him out. And it's like, ignore the 23 hours that you're doing and totally focus on the 3. That makes a lot of sense. Anyway, sorry, rant over. Michael says, I ride the 2 midweek training 60 minutes each. I'm getting in an additional outdoor ride on Saturdays, and then I sub the indoor scheduled 90-minute ride with another outdoor ride. Both of these, quote, bike club weekends are about 50 miles apiece, Z2 and Z3. I don't know if you're talking about 7-zone or 3-zone model. Zones are quite inspecific these days. But knowing that it's bike club weekend rides, man, I'm going to say that that's the 3-zone model that you're doing like middle and above, because I don't know any bike club group ride that gets together and they're like, hey guys, let's roll a conservative pace.
Yeah. Coffee ride means 5 alarm, like race effort.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Ain't nobody sticking below their aerobic threshold. So I'm pretty sure I underfuel the weekend rides. Michael, I applaud you for your honesty. This is wonderful. This is really good. I understand this could impact my in-ride performance and slow my recovery post-ride. I've been noticing that on the weekends, I can't seem to quench my appetite. Eating has become an all-day affair, and that's my great concern. I'm literally eating all day Saturday and Sunday, and it spills into Monday, and having been overweight prior to cycling, this eating pattern concerns me. Naturally, I want to do what I can to get this under control. Sorry for all this info. Now to the actual question. Is this a result of underfueling my rides?
Yeah.
What do you think, Ivy?
Yeah, for sure.
Next question.
Wrap it up. I experience the same eating patterns when I too underfuel, even just a short workout, and if you're worried about throwing off your metabolism, which it sounds like that's their greatest concern, the last thing you should be doing is an underfueled 50-mile ride a couple days a week. And I bet that's exactly what's leading to that binge eating, need that happens after these rides. Because I feel like I experience it too when I don't, or when I do fuel appropriately, for short or long workouts. I think it kind of changes after the 4-hour mark. Even if I fuel appropriately, I'm still starving afterwards. But when I fuel appropriately, I rarely feel starving when I finish the ride and, in the evening and morning that follows. So I think that's what's leading to this need to just, cram calories in the days that follow and in the nights that follow these rides is you're starving yourself during these rides and your body needs it and doesn't know how to react. And so binge eating is what feels like what's needed,
Mm-hmm. Hannah, as a pro, like in doing this every day and it's your job to train all that stuff, I'm sure you've experienced this.
Yeah. I mean, I think that when you start training a ton, if you're putting in massive hours, there can be a place where it's just really difficult to meet your nutritional needs. And so, you might see on Instagram people like Keegan or Alex Wilde or, these people putting out massive numbers and training, eating all the time. And that is what they need. And depending on what you're doing, it could be something you need as well. But just based on what you're describing, 50-mile ride, low volume plan, this sounds like exactly what Ivy's saying. It's just a complete result of you underfueling these rides. And so when you get back, your body and your brain is in sort of this panic state of like, oh my gosh, I need all the food. And then, so I think first, start by fueling your rides better. And then second, have a really good meal or nutrition plan for when you get back from your ride, because that's where I see the biggest thing is sometimes I'll get home and I won't have the plan, or I'm busy, or you're just like, I'm going to skip it today. And then that's when it's like, oh, and now I'm eating a snack here and then a snack there and a snack here and a snack there. And you're like eating because you never got what you needed. And so your body is just asking for more because it needs more, because you haven't given it the nutrition that it needs. And so that's where I think having the very first thing you do when you walk in the door be meeting those nutritional needs, it can help eliminate that need for it later. And I mean, that's carbohydrates and protein. You need both of those when you get back. And so that's another thing I wonder too, is if you're thinking, well, when I'm underfueling my rides, but then when I get back, I do eat well. I would look, are you eating carbs and protein? Because you need both of those things in order for your body to start recovering and rebuilding.
I've got a hack for breaking this cycle, Michael. And this is like, at least it works for me. I don't really know. It's really not a hack, but when I get into a situation where I've underfueled, maybe like I've come into the ride depleted, and try as I might to fuel throughout, I still, I'll burn close to 1,000 calories in an hour. And then as a result, at the end of that, like I can't eat 1,000 calories in that hour on the bike too. So I'm just in that hole for whatever reason. All I want to do after that, I don't want to reach for carbs and protein. I want to go smash a package of cookies, right? And and all the stuff that my body doesn't need, that's the stuff that I crave. And then what happens is I eat that and my body's like, yeah, I really wanted that, but actually I got nothing from it. So just eat more of that. And then it's like, it then pushes you to eat more and more and more and more. And your body probably, furnace is hot sort of a situation, is probably able to just burn off a lot of that stuff. I don't know. But in the end, it's not satisfying nourishment. And there's so much value that comes from and it'd be great to have Alex Larson on for this question, because I'm sure she'd have some great advice on this. But what I find, the fix, is that when I come back, I am already building in my head this plan after the workout. I'm like, okay, so I'm going to have brown rice. I'm going to have black beans. I'm going to have some quinoa in there. I'm going to have micronutrient dense. I'm going to throw in some greens. I'm going to throw in a bunch of different stuff. Then I'm going to throw in a good amount of protein. And if I eat a meal like that with a lot of complex carbohydrates that are going to take a long time to break down and do that sort of thing, and I have a lot of protein that's also satiating, my body is like, yeah, we're good. Thanks, man. Appreciate it. I swear. It's just it could be psychological for me, but when I do that, it stops me from feeling like I'm in this insatiable hunger state. And instead, my body feels like it gets what it needs.
So what you're saying is if I house a bag of Doritos, I'm going to still need that stuff afterwards.
Unfortunately, that's always how it works out, at least for me. I don't know. I don't know if it's different, but I bet a lot of people are identifying with it. Yeah.
But also have all of that stuff ready, because I feel
huge tip.
That's the biggest barrier a lot of the time for that quality nutrition is you might come home and even be like, oh yeah, brown rice, quinoa, black beans, that sounds pretty solid. But then when you put the quinoa or the rice or whatever in the rice cooker and you press go and it's 45 minutes, you're like,
so Doritos.
Wait 45 minutes. So then
the
you're
Doritos time. It can be a Dorito chef. You just open up the bag and you're ready.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So have that ready. It makes a big difference.
Yeah, huge tip. And that's hard. That's effectively meal prep planning sort of a situation. You have to have leftovers or you have to have something prepared beforehand for something like that. So it is tough.
That can also be a really good time for a recovery drink. I think that's something else is if I do come home and nothing's prepared, I can put that meal in the rice cooker. And then during that 45-minute window, have my recovery drink. That'll hold me over until it finishes. So I think, that's a good interim option is that recovery drink. That's a great place for that.
I have other easy buttons for this. Okay. So here in the US, there's Seeds of Change or Ben's Original Ready Rice. And you can get whole grain medleys of wild rice, brown rice, and quinoa. and I have those, and then that way it's literally 1 minute and or 90 seconds in the microwave, and that's done. And then I'm turning into Nate. Air fryer, and you can air fry bacon so fast, and then it drains all the grease out of it too, which is awesome. I also enjoyed that fact of it. But air fried bacon is like heavenly crispy, and it's awesome, and it doesn't get as thin either. It's really good. Anyways, you can air fry bacon in like a few minutes, and I usually just like air fry a batch of it in the week, and then after that, I can just put that onto things. You throw that in with your rice, and then you have like, like a bag salad or something. If you wanted to mix it all together, boom, you've got like your meal right there. And it's really easy, and you don't have to wait for a long time.
I have another easy button that I'm totally ashamed of, but I feel like I need to share it.
Do it. Let's do it. Yeah.
I promise I only do it once every couple weeks when I have a really hard workout, and when I maybe didn't fuel appropriately in the morning of leading up to the workout, and I know I'm depleted and I'm rushing back to get on a call or get on a meeting or do something, and I don't have time to. I don't want to put a pack of rice in the microwave and fry vegetables and like do all that stuff, and I don't have time. I'll be finishing the workout and order Chipotle DoorDash on my phone and get extra rice and extra beans, and it's delivered like 5 minutes after I get home. And it's
perfect.
Not a great habit to get into. But
why though? It's just because of cost, are you saying? Because I mean, nutritionally speaking, it's good, right? Like it's got a lot of good stuff in there.
Totally. So. I think just, being like, oh yeah, DoorDash is a slippery slope for me. And then all of a sudden I'm like, where'd all my money go? Oh, like hundreds of dollars in delivery fees. Okay, got it. So, but it's just so nice in those, in those 911 situations where I'm like, if I don't have something ready to eat immediately, I'm not going to do it. And I shouldn't have even done the workout because it's all going to go to waste if I'm not recovering and refueling and rebuilding from this workout. I'm going to blow it. And so I'll just get DoorDash, Chipotle. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's super practical and like a really good suggestion. It does get costly for sure if you DoorDash it. If you can like swing by on the way back from your ride, even that's ideal, of course. But yeah.
Okay, thanks for not judging me, guys. Thank you so much.
Zero judgment. Yeah. I always tip way too much too, and then I'm like, geez, but I feel like they're like the delivery people are holding my food hostage. Like if I don't tip them, what are they going to do to my food? I don't want to introduce any anxiety.
There's no way that they know. I think that's as a matter of policy to make sure that you don't feel like your food is being held hostage. I don't think the tip is transparent until like after the fact.
Good. Because I've like wasted way too much money on that. I'm like 37% tip, sure. Like just like don't spit in my burrito, please. Sorry, off the rails.
It's okay.
Yeah, that's honestly the best thing you can do. And this is going to be a plug for a coffee shop stop, like sort of a thing, or not coffee shop, but like restaurant stop on your way home. If this is like social group ride sort of things, be like, hey bros, like let's go get some burritos afterward and like eat a burrito and then spin home. That's a great way to make sure that you've got some nutrition on board and also an awesome time with your friends just to like chill and relax and enjoy something and add like an additional social element to it. Like in Tucson, everyone stops by Sace afterward. And that's like at Sace Burritos, like a taco shop, and it's incredibly good. And everyone stops there after the shootout and they get themselves burritos. And like, yes, it's social, but in the end, it's also like they just did a really hard effort and they're getting nutrition on board before the ride's even finished. And yeah, helps it so that the next day and the day after that, you can keep on going. So yeah, hopefully that was practical advice for you. Okay, Alex question, last one. I'm training for Park City Point to Point. Last year, and actually before I even get into that, Hannah, are you going to race Park City Point to Point? I don't know if you ever have, and it's like so close to you, right?
I have raced it. Yeah, I raced it in 2018. I love it. I mean, it's all of my favorite trails basically in one day.
Yeah, for sure.
So I'm like really hurting that I'm not going to do it. Like as a part of that pain, I'm like, maybe I'll just jump in.
Yeah.
But no, I'm not planning on doing it because I'm racing 6 weeks in a row from September to October. So
whoa,
adding one more week would be I think, a little too much, especially an effort like point to point being the first of what would be 7-week block then.
A not small effort. It's almost 80 miles and over 10,000 feet of climbing. And it's always famously like over 99% single track too. So even just fries your brain.
Such a fun race. So everyone should go do it.
I had it on my list this year to do. And, it's a season for other things for the next handful of months, to focus on family and stuff and not leave them on Labor Day weekend to go for a long bike race. So I guess next year I'll have to take it on. So, okay.
Sounds good. We'll both do it.
Awesome. Yeah. Fist bump. We're in. So, Alex says, I'm training for Park City point to point. Last year I didn't run inserts. Those are tire inserts, little foam tubes that you put inside your rims effectively. At least for the XC world, the Cush Core and stuff, they're more structured for downhill stuff. But anyways, that's what tire inserts are. But Alec mentions I was just fine without inserts. However, last month I've had 2 pinch flats, including one that cracked my rim. I'm running the same tires, which are Aspen 2.4s that I've been running at 20 PSI, and I weigh 145 pounds, which 20 PSI without inserts is where I would be running at 140 pounds. I would probably be closer to like 18, but that's not out of the realm of possibility. That's a pretty firm tire. I've been looking at those Vittoria light inserts. I'm debating between running higher pressure with still a chance of flatting. I would not run higher pressure than 20 PSI, weighing 145 pounds on 2.4 Aspens. That's just going to get sketchier and sketchier and probably cause more flats, strangely, because you're going to lack control in those crucial moments and probably hit the rocks that you don't want to hit. So it's not a function of tire pressure directly in terms of protecting your rim, but tire pressure making your bike less stable. 2.4s are big tires, and you don't have to run them at such high pressure. You kind of drop them. So, so they've been debating on which they should do. So debating between running higher pressure with still a chance of flatting or just accepting the 50 grams of rotational weight. I'm not going to win the race, just shooting for sub 9 hours. Keegan will shoot for sub 6 this year for sure. Is the weight penalty worth the peace of mind and time that I would lose if I were to flat and stick a tube in over the 75-mile course?
You guys a weight
Can I just
penalty?
cover?
Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah.
50 grams is like 0.1 pounds. Brother.
Yeah.
There's sorry.
Yeah. You're good. Yeah. Especially let's cover rotational weight and then we can get into something else. But rotational weight is far overblown. There's been different, like if you even run the physics on it, there have been great videos on YouTube that have been done on this, by the way, you can check them out. But if you run the physics on it, we're talking about like a very small amount. We're talking fractions of a % of difference in power output during accelerations to achieve like the same acceleration rate when you add something like 250 grams to your wheels, which is not 100 grams like we're talking about here. It's a really small amount in our minds, and we've blown this up, and like it makes a lot of logical sense to think like rotational weight. And while that is true, the difference in weight that we're talking about is so small in relation to the power that we're putting out that it's very minimal. In a discipline like time trialing, it's effectively irrelevant. In a discipline like cyclocross and mountain biking, it is more relevant. However, even then, I think that it is effectively irrelevant for you, 50 grams per wheel. Everyone focuses on weight way too much. And this is even rotational weight, particularly in this case, when we're talking 50 grams per. Yeah, you won't have to worry about that. Don't let that be a concern whatsoever on there. Hannah, what would you say in this case?
Yeah, I feel like let's just get this out of the way. Given the information that you've supplied, just run the inserts. It's not a big penalty. The weight is so minimal. Just do it. But from a learning standpoint, the biggest thing that I see in this question that's sort of a red flag to me is I feel like this person is just speaking in pretty absolutes. I run this tire at this PSI and sometimes this time I flatted, this time I didn't. Like, what am I doing different? Well, the train is changing. And so I don't know if that is specifically what they're trying to get at, but all of those things, including inserts, should change based on the train. So Park City point to point isn't that rocky. It doesn't have that many big hits. It's more relatively speaking, smooth trails, still a very technical course, but it's not a big hit sort of race. And so if I were to do that race, I wouldn't be that concerned about pinch flats. It's just not the type of terrain that generally happens on. If it's a really rocky place, like if these 2 pinch flats that you just experienced were in trails that had these big impacts, maybe drops onto rocks and things like that, that's a totally different circumstance. And A doesn't equal B. And so all of those things should change. And so in the future, when you're making these type of decisions, I would just factor in a lot more of what am I concerned about in this race? What is the terrain telling me? Even the 20 PSI, especially the 20 PSI, that should change and vary with every course, every trail that you're riding. It shouldn't just be this is what I run it at, one and done.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I would say, Alec, that you are even asking the most important question about inserts is how much more control can I get out of my tires if I run inserts? So if you run inserts, what you'll be able to do is you'll be able to drop your pressure substantially lower. When you drop that lower down to, I typically run, what did I run this weekend, Ivy? I think it was like 15 and a half and 16 and a half PSI on my tires and my 2.4s on 30 millimeter rims with inserts. And I'm weighing like 150-ish pounds, 150 to 155. So for you, Alec, you could run even less. At Cape Epic, I ran 11 and a half and 12 and a half on a muddy day. And like with inserts, and that was okay. And I never rimmed out. So 20 is really high, but if you aren't running inserts, it totally changes the sort of pressures that you need to run because you're changing the air volume inside substantially in your tires. And as a result, it changes all that. So anyways, you will be so much more planted and controlled on that trail, on any trail, and have way more control and ability to select lines and not hit rocks if you run lower pressure. And I think that's kind of the funny thing that a lot of people don't talk about with inserts. They're like, I don't get flats anymore with inserts. And it's not just because you're slamming the same rocks the same way. You're avoiding rocks like you haven't avoided them before because you have better control, particularly on XC tires when you're so limited. 50 grams, just for a point of reference, that's like a piece of Wonder Bread. So that's like the lightest, like add 2 pieces of Wonder Bread to you and be like, oh my gosh, like I can't climb uphill now. Like nobody would say that. So like that's really a small amount. And it shows, like, to what Ivy's point is, like how minuscule that difference is while there's so much upside. It's like 0 downside. Yes, it makes it a little bit tougher to install your tires, but these are not cush core. It's not like you're, wrestling something and getting it on really tough. I haven't used the Vittoria ones yet, but I've heard that they're very easy, just like the Tubolite ones that I use, really easy to put on. So they even help some tires inflate better so you don't need a pump because it pushes the bead down. Like, honestly, there's so many perks to using them. Do it. End of story from my perspective.
The only other concept I want to introduce when thinking about weight penalties, equipment penalties that, might be better performance-wise, but you do pay a tax. The only other thing I want for Alec to consider is how much time you would lose by some extra weight and how much time you could potentially gain by feeling confident and secure in your equipment. Apart from what John mentioned of how much more traction and, better handling you'll have by being able to run a lower pressure with inserts, but just to have that peace of mind, especially with your history of flatting. I know if it was me and I was like, okay, I'm not going to add this extra weight because that's important to me and I don't want to add weight, and so I'm not going to run inserts and we'll just see what happens. The amount of anxiety that I would have and how honestly poorly I would ride, I think, in technical sections because of that fear that I would flat again, I would cost myself so much time versus if I just did the inserts and felt confident and knew that I have this big cushion, window of safety for things to, go wrong and I don't have to worry about it anymore. I would ride so much faster, and that's a benefit worth considering that confidence in your equipment gives you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, really well. Yeah, great point, Ivy. Mm-hmm. So Alec, good luck at Park City Point to Point. And hopefully this helps other people think about tires. If you have questions about tire pressure, wheels, all that stuff, you can send them in, or about training, nutrition, anything. Do so at trainerroad.com/podcast. We'd love to hear from you all. You can also rate and share this podcast. That's honestly, it's a huge thing. If you subscribe to our YouTube channel, if you subscribe on any podcast platform and you share that with your friends, that's like, we don't have any sort of like donation, sponsor me stuff. That's it. If you could do that, that's huge. That will help more people find this, more people find TrainerRoad, and we can build more great things. So I think that covers it for this week. Hannah, I'm excited to see how you do at Schwamigan.
Good luck.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Paying attention as much. And then your crazy 5 races, I think it is, in the subsequent weeks after that. Mm-hmm. So it's going to be a lot. I'm excited to see how it all goes.
Is Lifetime trying to kill people? I would like to know.
Yeah, actually, what races are you doing? Can you name them off? So then people, if they're there, they can find you.
Schwamigan, then Mountain Bike Marathon Nationals. Then
where's that at this year?
Auburn, Alabama.
Oh, cool. Nice.
Mm-hmm. Then the Snowshoe World Cup. Then the then Mount St. Anne World Cup. Then the Little Sugar mountain bike race, and then the Big Sugar gravel race.
Wow. Yeah, that's all the way through that's all the way through October. I wonder how they're going to do Mont St. Anne in the first week of October.
Could be very interesting.
Riding the Beatrice in snow could be a wild experience.
It could be, yes.
Yeah. I'm curious to see how that goes. So cool. Well, good luck, Hannah. Go find Hannah on Instagram. We'll link down to her Instagram below so you can find her. Cheer her on in person if you're at those races. Sign up for TrainerRoad, share it with your friends. We'll talk to you next week. Thanks, y'all.